business owner? Entrepreneur? Want to learn how online marketing can improve your business?
Your questions.
Our advice.
This is Not a Real Job.
Welcome to episode 74 of Not a Real Job, a show about turning the things you love into things that make you money. That sounds like turning your loved ones or pets or children into things that make you money, which maybe I said that wrong. Anyway, I'm Joel and I do marketing up in Canada.
I am Chris, and I sleep a lot in the U.S.
Sleepy Chris.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
How is the U.S. these days?
It's okay. You know, it's doing its thing.
You think it'll be? You think it's sustainable? You think this American idea is going to make it after all?
You know, I feel pretty good about our prospects. You know, we've got the declarations and the constitutions, and people seem to like those things. So yeah,
okay,
I feel good.
Well, that's good.
The little
That's good.
American experiment here, I believe we like to call it.
Yeah, you know, I worry. I just like to check in from time to time, make sure things are still trucking along.
Sure. Now, how you up there in the north? How's the monarchy treating you?
Good.
You have that, right?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. We have a king and queen.
You have a king?
Oh yeah, a couple of them.
Who's the current king of Canada?
He's actually just called King Canada.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's like kind of like the Pope. You get a new name when you become king, and we just call it's just King Canada. I mean, I don't know what his name was before. Kind of forget about that, but yeah, it's just, you know, big King C.
Now, what does KC here look like? Because I'm just picturing the guy from Burger King.
That is precisely what he looks like.
Now, wait, are you saying? I'm gonna make a connection here.
Yep.
A little bit of abduction. Is King Canada also the Burger King?
Correct.
Interesting.
That's why Burger King just bought Tim Hortons.
Wow.
It's not a tax inversion like everyone suggested. It's just synergies.
Sure,
I mean,
it's consolidation.
They both had the same king.
That makes sense.
Why not? Yeah, no, it's simple. And we finally get to rid ourselves of Tim Hortons. It's officially now an American problem.
You know, I do have to say, though, well, I mean, it's probably more of an Irish problem or something like that.
Probably.
The way these tax things work.
Yeah.
But I do love the Tim Hortons sourdough donut. Now, you probably have never experienced the joy of one of these, being of the vegetable-based persuasion, but man, what a great donut.
Yeah, I used to actually consume donuts. I have not.
Wait,
I was not born vegetarian.
Really?
I know. It's crazy. Yep.
You can never tell.
Yeah, I know exactly. No, I'm actually the first in my line.
Your dynasty.
Exactly. Yes. So I became vegetarian at. It's around 12 or 13 when that's actually my mutant powers manifested, and my mutant power was the ability to not consume meat.
That, to me, seems like a very sad mutant power.
Yeah, it's kind of like, not everyone gets to be an X-Men. There's just mutants out there. It's like that Family Guy episode where Meg's superpower is just growing her fingernails really long.
Yeah. You did get super size and super strength, though, I would assume.
Well, you're half right. I did grow to an enormous size, but shockingly
all Bunyan-esque.
Yeah,
those of us here in
shockingly
America.
weak though. Not, can really I can barely move under my own weight.
Oh man, I know that feel.
But my other superpower, access to scooters.
Huh.
Yeah, so I've taken to just scooting around.
Wait, how have you? What is there a story here? What's the scooter sitch?
No, there's no story here. Though I did hurt my foot, and I've become convinced I have gout, which might be an overreaction. But
Your other superpower is hypochondria.
Hypochondria paired with a phobia of doctors. So basically, I'm worried all the time that I have a serious disease, but do nothing about it.
Mm-hmm. You don't have the emotional means to deal with the issue.
Exactly. Yeah. So just, you know what? One step closer to the grave.
Excellent.
I wanted, first of all, Christopher,
Mm-hmm.
are you drinking anything?
I am consuming water in copious quantities because I am sick. I don't want to go into the messy details, but I just want you all to know that and know that this is how much I love you, that I have climbed out of bed to record this podcast.
Mm-hmm. And just so everyone doesn't think that I'm necessarily the bad guy here, I didn't suggest you had to do the podcast today.
Right. Well, I mean, what I think does make you the bad guy is that you were sort of like, well, if we don't record it, I don't mind.
I guess that's true.
There was a subtle hint there, and I was like, no, I don't want to be that guy.
No, you're a better person for it.
Because then we would have canceled the show, and then you would have tweeted, Chris was sick this week and pinned this all on me. Made me look like the bad guy. So no, sir. Good try.
That's absolutely what I would have done.
Anyway,
I just downed a glass of soy milk.
Excellent.
Yeah, super interesting. This episode's drinks chat will make it into the classics reel.
The annals of Not a Real Job.
I believe it's pronounced anals.
I don't, but that's okay.
Yeah. So what I wanted to talk about today, Chris, is I think I'm starting another podcast. Now, I don't want you to worry. I'm not gonna fall in love with this other podcast and drift away from this one, but
I mean that's okay if I wouldn't, who needs
you wouldn't
mind?
You wouldn't mind if I gave up on this podcast.
I think I could do a pretty good job steering the ship solo.
Probably. I'm not. Yeah. Yeah. I can't disagree. And I'm listeners out there probably are on the same page. I know that I'm kind of the hated member of our little duo here, but that's fine.
Somebody has to be. It's all right.
Yeah, exactly. That's my other mutant power is nobody likes me.
Oh. Anyway, you're starting another podcast. Tell us more.
Well, it started with a friend of mine asked me for some recommendations of songs he should listen to from one of my the favorite recording artists. And every time I tried to put together just a list of like, here's 10 songs, it would grow into the scope of it. Because I am an obsessive person, would grow into basically a tome. So I was thinking, do I write 50,000 words about songs you should listen to, or should I just start a weekly podcast? So I'm starting a weekly podcast about music. Yeah.
I think you're probably the first person to do that, a music podcast once a week.
Well, there's only, exactly.
You're early mover on this.
There's comedy, there's marketing, and then I thought I had the idea. Why aren't people talking about music? This never happened before. Even on the radio, there's no music. It's just news and sports.
There's no discussion.
No. I actually haven't even. They're playing music now.
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, maybe not up in Canada. I don't know how quickly things make it north of the border there, but they do here in the States.
The closest we have is Moose Talk Hour, and it's a call-in show where people just call in to talk about different moose that they've seen.
Interesting.
And sometimes people will sing. They'll be like, "Hey, moosey, moosey, moosey," and that's the closest we have to music.
Huh. All right. Well, then you are on top of it then. Really starting something new,
I'm worried that Americans have already started talking about music on the radio.
Don't worry about it. You've got 10 people up there in Canada. They'll listen.
I guess. I might give up on this whole thing. But the reason I bring this up, Chris, is not to talk about Moose Talk Hour, because you really just need to listen to that for yourself. If let's say you were starting a new podcast from scratch, do you have any recommendations of what people should know? Like, let's assume we've got audience members out there. They're like, I love listening to Not a Real Job. These guys are amazing. I want to do the same thing. What could we tell them to kind of help them along?
Oh boy, that's a big question. I would say a couple things. Okay. I would say first, don't necessarily think you're going to get it right on the first try, and don't be afraid to keep it going. I think that's something that we normally don't do, but did here, in that, we didn't have listeners for the first 20 episodes, but we still kept going. And I think that turned out to actually be incredibly valuable to us, because it meant that we had a lot of time to sort of figure out what we wanted to talk about and figure out where the show was going. I think this is more apparent in podcasting than in other mediums, such as blogging or whatever. Because blogging, you do kind of get instant feedback that you don't necessarily get on a podcast in the form of comments and things like that. So I think you have to sort of not be afraid of that, and maybe use it to your advantage and say that, you might not get that feedback instantaneously, but that gives you time to sort of develop what you want your show to be like. And I don't necessarily mean the topics that you're going to cover. I mean more like the format of the show, the level of banter versus level of, heads down, serious conversation kinds of stuff. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's probably it's not super technical, but I think it's the one big thing that I took away from the development of this show, which is really still an ongoing thing. I think our past couple episodes have been maybe a little more on the funnies and things that, compared to the first 70 or whatever. But I think that's okay too. And I think it's really easy to get into the trap of it's got to be perfect the first time around. But with podcasting, I think it doesn't need to be that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And one of the things that we could have done at the beginning was kind of spend more time thinking about, how we could make recording the podcast kind of more fun, and as a result, the final product would probably be more fun as well. We were a little too serious. We were approaching things, from how do we think analytically this is going to be a good podcast versus, why don't we just sit down and have fun and see if something comes of it. And I think as we got closer to that, the podcast itself has become, I think, better, because you can kind of sense, I think, when the hosts of a podcast are enjoying it or not. At least that's how I feel. Even there's episodes of my Mim where you can sense that they're just not into it. And you can tell that versus the ones where, the banter is better because they're feeling better about recording it that day.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
So I would say, yeah, if you're starting a podcast from scratch, if episode 1 doesn't feel right, maybe don't release it, or maybe think about how you can adjust it. It should be fun from the start, especially because, you might hit instant success. But it's far more likely you're going to do a bunch of episodes without anyone hearing it, really. So if you're not enjoying it, then you might give up a little too quickly.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah. What else? What do you think are some of the things you would want somebody to know?
Get yourself a comfortable setup. Like we've talked before, and maybe we'll link to it in the show notes of, some of the equipment that we use, really fairly basic stuff. Nothing super expensive, but make sure it's comfortable. Make sure that you can that it feels like something you can do every week. Don't overcomplicate things. Have a setup that's simple enough that it doesn't feel like it's going to be a burden to go record. I think that's something that even I, for the first couple episodes of recording this, my I just didn't have, the microphone set up in a good way. I didn't have, all my cords and cables here. And it really was, it was thinking about like, oh crap, I've got to spend 10 minutes, setting up. And that was kind of a little burdensome. So I would think I'd recommend getting yourself a comfortable, simple setup, putting things in such a place that if you have the time to go record, you can just go do it without needing a lot of accoutrement.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and to sort of extend that even further, and this obviously isn't going to be right for everyone. If you don't want to spend a lot of money on your podcast, that's fine. But I think one of the reasons we have been doing the show as long as we have, and we've said this before, is because we have a really good process in place for recording the show and, sharing the show online. We've sort of set that up in a way that we have multiple people involved doing very sort of specific tasks. And again, that might not be right for you if you're on a budget, or if you're, looking to do something very specific. You might not be able to hire somebody to help out, but if you are in that position, I think certainly for me anyway, that is kind of what made or broke, doing the show, is that it wasn't a lot of work. Whereas previous podcasts that I had been involved with, where I was doing the editing and writing show notes and things, it can be very time consuming. So I guess sort of tied on to there is have an awareness that podcasting is not necessarily an easy thing, especially if you're going to be doing all the work yourself. So, as you embark on a podcast, just be ready for the fact that it's going to take a lot of work. And if you don't think you're up for that work, maybe you should look for a different medium to communicate your ideas and your thoughts. Because podcasting is, it seems like it's just talking into a microphone, but unless you've set up a process for getting the other tasks done, you're going to have to do those as well. And those can be pretty time consuming and involved.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think the other thing is if you're thinking about starting a podcast, make sure that it scratches some other itch for you than just, I feel like I need to have a podcast, or I feel like this is information I have to get out to the world. It should make you, I don't know, for me, this podcast, even if no one ever listened to it, I like it because, every Sunday I talk to my friend Chris. Like there's a benefit to having the podcast, even if people didn't hear it, which I would recommend that if you're starting a new podcast, make sure that even if no one hears it, you had fun doing it. And again, that'll keep you doing it, through kind of the harder times where you're putting all this work in and it doesn't feel like anyone's hearing it. And also remember, like everyone talks about, the podcast explosion, like it's finally the time for podcasts and everything's taking off. But like Marco Arment was talking on Accidental Tech Podcast, like his podcast app Overcast like scans for basically every podcast out there it can find, all the various feeds, and there's something like only 250,000 podcasts like in the total internet that Overcast is able to find. Like that's a pretty small number. Like this is not does that mean it's a great time to get into podcasting? Probably, because you're among a smaller number, but it doesn't mean that if you have a podcast, fans will follow necessarily. You are kind of shouting out to a fairly small circle when we're talking about the internet as a whole. It's a fairly small circle, so make sure you're not expecting instant success, and make sure that's something you actually enjoy doing, not just something you feel for whatever reason obligated to.
So I guess the other thing that I would say is that podcasting itself, like the content that you're putting out, is not anything new. Like, I mean, obviously that what you're talking about and the order of the words that you're speaking is new, but the idea of radio talk shows have been around for a long time. The only difference here is that the mechanism of delivery, right? So it's basically sending out audio snippet files through internet RSS feeds or anything. That's all that's new. The actual content of the shows or the way that you're presenting your information is not new. So, when people say, oh, podcasting is this hot new thing, well, sure, maybe downloading an app to your phone and downloading audio through the internet is a new thing, but actually talking into microphones is not new at all. So I don't know. I don't really have a point here except to say that I find that that whole argument that podcasting is the hot new next thing, it's ridiculous because it's not really new. And yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and that so much of that was driven by things like Serial, blockbuster stuff that that takes over. But of course, Serial success was built so much on the fact that it came from This American Life, which has a huge radio listenership who kind of moved over to podcasting.
Yes, podcasting is relatively new and relatively untapped compared to a radio audience, but all the major, certainly in the US, major radio stations that do, regular shows are putting those on, iTunes podcasts as well. So don't think this is some big, that you just discovered the next big thing and no one knows about it and you're going to jump to the top of the charts instantly, because it's not going to happen. You are in competition with the biggest content producers with millions and millions of dollars, in the world, commercial producers, nonprofits, everyone. If people who have a foothold in radio already have a big advantage over you, and don't let that discourage you necessarily, but just be aware of the landscape.
Yeah, remember 2007, where Twitter celebrities, the people who cracked 100,000 were tech people. The celebrity on Twitter was possible for kind of normals for a little while, and then as soon as actual celebrities joined, those people were immediately overshadowed. It is the same thing with podcasting. If Taylor Swift were to start a podcast, there would be many think pieces written about how podcasting is obviously the next big thing because look how many listeners Taylor Swift has. That has nothing to do with podcasts and everything to do with Taylor Swift. So anyway, this all sounds a little discouraging, but I think it comes back to doing this for the fun of it and hoping that success and bags of cash follows, instead of thinking, well, I keep hearing that podcasts are the new thing, so I guess I should be there.
Yeah, exactly. You have to do it because you love it. Because if you're not loving it, then find something else you do love, because you're going to be so much better at that. Anyway, I think the second part of this discussion we talked about was maybe going into some of our goals for this show in 2015. What do we want to do with Not a Real Job now that we're sort of, evolving the format again and getting more comedy in there, hopefully still helpful information. What are we trying to do this year?
What can we do to make this podcast more like Serial?
Exactly.
Mystery.
I think I have to kill you. That's
one of us has to die next week on Not a Real Job. Yeah. So I think as far as what I'm thinking, for 2015, I really just do think that if we are making this transition to a different style of show and we are putting a little bit more time and effort into it, I think I really just wanted to make it a little bit more focused. I want us to have more topics maybe, but I don't know. I'm kind of curious to know what you're thinking, because I keep going back and forth to, should we button things down a bit and focus on topics and news and things like that, or do we just keep it kind of freewheeling and go from there? And I'm not sure I know what the answer is to that. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to favor a more focused, specific podcast, but I've also had more fun when I wasn't really worried about that. I think one thing that we need to do is get better about having a topic going into the show. And I think this week you did a great job coming up with a topic and stuff that we could talk about, that was around a specific theme. I think that kind of thing is something that we can do a little bit more. Certainly we enjoy taking questions and we want to continue taking questions and answering questions as much as we can. But yeah, I think part of it, for me, my goal in 2015, one is to start off by launching this rebranding, which I'll be working on over the next few weeks. So that's going to be a new website, new logo, sort of I imagine we'll rewrite a lot of the copy describing the show, because I think some of that is pretty outdated, and really just revamping the way that we view the show. And I think that, maybe will help us figure out what the tone of the show is going to be when we do have to sit down and sort of write out descriptions of the show for iTunes and for the website and things like that. I'm hoping that through that process, we're going to be able to clarify a bit what exactly we want the show to be. From there, like I would love to do some more marketing of the show. I think we haven't grown the audience in quite a while. And I think once we have a new look and feel in place and, make it a little easier to find the show, I think that's going to help a lot, going back and remarketing the show and finding new audiences that way.
Yeah, I think we've been kind of, paralyzed by the knowledge that we are making changes to the show, which has kind of stopped us from publicizing it as much as we'd probably both like to be doing. Like every time I think about, running some new ads on BimMam or on 5x5 or something like that, I always think about, well, the show's not quite where we want it to be yet with the rebrand and everything. So let's not do that. So once that's all done, then I think marketing the show is something that, and maybe honestly, like I'm thinking of like, do we take advantage of all the buzz in the media about podcasts and try to get some like, why can't we get some coverage in like my local newspaper up here in Halifax? Like, I'm sure we could probably get an article about how, look at all the podcasts that are out of Halifax and everyone should tune in. You could probably get some coverage for something like that. So things like that I'd really like to do. But getting the rebrand done will be the exciting big part of that.
Yeah. And we're also, we talked a little bit about this after the show last week. The idea of doing a little bit more with our email list. So, we're looking at doing some kind of special email subscription to the show where you can get access a little bit early and things like that. So, we've got ideas. We're working on it. We've got a lot to do. I've got a lot to do with this new website and such, but I think we're in a good place. I think definitely the past 3 or 4 episodes have felt like we're kind of settling into a rhythm, whereas before it was kind of all over the place. So yeah, I'm feeling good about the show in this newest of the years. Yeah,
so I guess the thing is, like, write in, let us know what are your resolutions for Not a Real Job for 2015? What would you like the show to turn into? What would make it more enjoyable for you? And let us know, and we'll talk about it on the next episode.
There we go.
Nailed it. All right.
Perfect.
Gear picks. This is a thing we do. You can go to notarealjob.com/gear to see all our old suggestions, things that we've bought recently that we think you should buy. What do you have for us this week, Chris?
So I have a book. This, I will say in full disclosure, is a book that I have not read, but I got it for a friend as a Christmas present and thought, you know what, actually, I would like to read that myself. So I will be doing that in this new year, but I wanted to recommend it to you all because it seems really cool. It's called How Star Wars Conquered the Universe, the Past, Present, and Future of a Multi-Billion-Dollar Franchise. So it's basically the history of Star Wars and an examination of how it developed and where it's going in the future as a franchise. So, not necessarily the details about how, the idea of the Force was created, although I'm sure that's in there, but more of the mechanics of Star Wars as a business and as a series of films, rather than, the mythology that is in Star Wars. So I think it's sort of an interesting way to look at it all. And I skimmed a little bit. It seems really cool. It's got almost a perfect rating on Amazon, like 4.7 stars or something like that. So yeah, definitely check that out. And we, of course, will have the link in the notes. What about you?
I'm worried that I think you mispronounced it. I believe it's the Stars War.
Stars War, yes.
Sorry, I don't, there's just a minor correction. I bought a new router in my ongoing quest to speed up my internet that I'm paying a fortune for, but everything seems slow. Yes?
I think you mean router.
Yeah, sorry.
Internet router.
Router. ROOTER.
Yep.
Oh my God, we were watching the show. There's this show called The Mind of a Chef on Netflix. Check it out. It's pretty good. But anyway, they did an episode on barbecue. Like I was saying, they use every part of the pig from the rooter to the tooter. Anyway, thought that was kind of funny.
That's gross.
It's super gross, but it was kind of funny. Anyway, I bought a new router, the TP-Link Archer C7 AC 1750 dual band wireless AC gigabit router. 2.4
Oh boy,
gigahertz.
I've heard good things about that.
Well, like, okay, someone, like, people are out there like, why is everyone buying, like, Apple, airport routers when, there's so many better ones out there? You know why? Because Apple calls it the airport. That's it. Like, because they tell you if you want to connect to internet, buy this thing. They don't call it the Apple C7 AC 1750 dual band wireless AC gigabit. Like, oh my God.
So there's a recommendation for you out there. Name your product describing what it is.
Yeah, imagine you're trying to sell this to someone who isn't a computer nerd. Anyway, it's pretty good, super easy to set up. Another thing, make the interface to set up your router not look like it was designed in 1994. Anyway.
Now, is that what you're saying about this particular router?
This particular router, the interface is ugly as sin when you go to set it up. But
Joel, you're doing a great job of selling this to people.
Look, do you want a good router? Do you want your internet faster? Buy this one. My internet is faster. And it was easy to set up. It was just ugly to set up. Okay. But the thing looks pretty. It's a very pretty, as you will see it when you click on the link in the show notes. It's a gorgeous looking router, but oh goodness, people really need to get to marketing these things.
Maybe they can hire us.
Maybe they can hire us. All right.
There's an idea.
Housekeeping.
Anyway, yeah. Why don't you take it away?
Yeah, sure. Twitter.com/NARJcast, Facebook.com/NotARealJob, Twitter.com/Joel Kelly, Twitter.com/Chris Van Patten, and you can check out all our gear recommendations at NotARealJob.com/gear, and you can check out the show notes for this episode just over at Not a Real Job. It'll be like right there. It's probably, I guess, you know what, Chris? I shouldn't assume people are listening to this. Maybe they're catching up. Maybe people are listening to this in the future. Is it the year 2018 where you are? Could be. Anyway, possible. So if you want to find old show notes, notarealjob.com/episode-74 is where you will find the show notes for this episode. Boom. Done. Nailed it. Have a great week, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year yet again, even though you're listening to this almost certainly on January 7th or later. 2018. Say hi to the future for us. We hope we survive to see it.
Hope they're hoverboards.
Yeah. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.